the hardest thing for people that live out of state is yeah, they can buy a building, but what about all the logistics? So my business model is I offer them a complete turnkey experience. I've even had investors buy buildings that have never even seen it. They'll do walkthroughs with me. I'll help them with the inspection. We help them with the financing if they need help with that. I can help them with a great local attorney. We close. I set them up with a property manager. Sometimes I even help get the place leased for them during the transition. Then I hand it off to the property manager, and then I go about my merry way.
If you're a real estate agent earning $200,000 a year and you want to grow your passive income, this show is for you. Learn secrets other agents use and hear from experts in our field who will guide you on your journey to investing in assets like apartment communities, so you can take your commissions and turn them into cash flow. Here's your host, Randall. Let's dive in.
All right, welcome back. It is great to have you here with me today. I am talking with Lawrence Dunning. The guy's a beast. Like, it was an awesome conversation. Really enjoy sitting down, chatting with him. He's got a great energy, an awesome vibe. And so I just want to briefly highlight kind of what we talked about. He's in the Chicago market, and he does brokerage and he does investments on his own. Background in trading, and then he moved into professional fighting, which is awesome. We talk about that a little bit, and then he got into real estate. So we talk about his journey, how he got into the types of deals that he's working on now, ground up development, how he did his biggest deal ever last year. And we talk about the strategy that he's using to grow his broker side of the business plus his investment side of the business. So ton of knowledge, ton of information. And again, just a great spirit. He has this statement where he's like, I just want to be a black belt in life. And I was like, that's awesome. So we touch on that, and we really cover his 3 secrets to success. They come up throughout the entire conversation multiple times and in multiple different ways. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. If you're getting value out of the show, please go on, rate and review. It helps us a ton. Bring on awesome guests like this. And without further ado, let's jump into our conversation with Lawrence. Here we go. Let's kick it off. So then let me ask you how I saw that you're a black belt, right? And I saw that, a lot of the posts and stuff that you have up on Instagram. So like, how has that translated into your business life other than the connections that you made? Obviously that's a big one that you just mentioned, but is there anything else that you can relate between the two that has helped you be successful or succeed the way you have succeeded?
Well, I would say I've had 3 lives, 3 main themes in my life. And the first one was in finance. I had a trading company. And then the next, I took some time, like a sabbatical, to pursue fighting professionally. And then the last has been my real estate career. And it's so interesting. They're 3 completely separate things, but there's these themes that run through. And I think the most important thing is discipline. I really believe that I used to think when I was young, you could tick boxes, and then once you've done it, you can just have this easy life and you won't have anything to do. And now I've realized that every day from today until my last day, I'm hopefully going to do things that I don't really want to do in the moment, but I know it's going to be good for me. So a perfect example is I just got out of the cold plunge, and jumping that thing every morning, having one has been incredible. Putting that thing in my basement, it's just something that I don't want to do. I don't like the mornings. I don't like the cold. So I get in there for 3 minutes, I get out, and it's those little victories. Yeah. And we always overestimate what we can do in a short period of time and underestimate what we can do in a long period of time. And I was listening to a podcast last night, and he said, measure in decades, not in days, weeks, or months, and not even in years. And I think when I look back at my life, it's been the same thing for me. I've always measured in decades. I've never been a short-term thinker. I've always been a long-term planner. So jiu-jitsu, you might not see the benefits for a long time, but the longer you do it, the better you get, the more you're going to see the benefits. And it's exactly the same in real estate. I was actually joking with my wife. I have a spreadsheet with my sales, and I was joking about how pitiful my first couple of years were. And she was like, it's not that bad. And I was like, well, it's not. Looking now, of course, it looks like it's terrible. But the one thing that I got from day one in real estate was I'm not trying to close a sale next month and make a commission. I'm trying to learn and develop skills that I'm going to get paid for the rest of my life. I'm going to try and develop relationships that are going to be mutually beneficial for the rest of my career. So just having that long-term mindset, I think is so important. But yeah, it's interesting to see. I've been very blessed to have 3 completely different careers. And it's just very interesting when you look at things that overlap in completely different fields. I have a good friend who says, where there's overlap, there's truth. And I think there's a lot to that saying. Like, you'll see certain themes that just keep coming up And yeah, I think just having that long-term mindset is really important. Being disciplined, just trying to make small incremental improvements every day. And then just having, it's so funny, those three industries, I think the relationships you build are so important. So I look at my trading and you have I was trading on the trading floor in the pit. So 100 guys fighting for trades. So the relationship that you have is the reputation you have is if you just lock eyes with somebody, that's basically you're agreeing on a trade. And when there's 10 people behind you, it's incredibly subtle and there often is mistakes. But if you think a broker is looking at you with a huge order and you take it, you're thinking that you locked eyes, you and him, for that 1 second, for that big order, 500 sold. And then I'm on my headset and I'm hedging my position. I was an option trader, but it could have been that four guys behind me also were looking at the same guy, trying to get the same trade. So it all comes down to trust and integrity. And then the same thing when you're fighting, it's so your teammates, you're trying to kill each other in the gym, but the bonds you make are so close because it is dangerous. And then when you compete, it's the closest thing aside from war. It's like you're going to war together. You know, your teammates are fighting on the same card and everything. And you just develop this bond and this trust. And even now, if I had an old teammate call and they needed help, I would, get in my car at 2 a.m. and help them out because you develop those bonds. And I realized in real estate, I'm seeing more and more the relationships, the real top agents, a lot of the time in a busy market, stuff never actually hits the open market. A lot of stuff is pre-market stuff and it's about contacts. It's people calling you. And I didn't realize I was doing this over the last few years, but I was developing a lot of very strong relationships. And looking back at the last year, it was so interesting just to see the amount of things that closed that never actually hit the open market. It was buyers and sellers getting matched. It was people calling me like, hey, this is about to get listed. And I've got the perfect person for that. And that's something I never would have even imagined when I got in the business. I thought it was just like, things got listed and then you saw it and then you wrote an offer. So it's just, that's another theme. The relationship theme has been one that's been interesting. So it's just, sorry, I know I'm rambling, but it's just so interesting seeing these different themes in completely different areas of your life, and it kind of comes together. It's pretty cool.
I mean, that was something I wanted to touch on because, again, in that same post that I saw, you're like secrets of success: play the long game, invest in yourself, build relationships. Those three things. And so you're touching on, the long game. I love that. I wanted to talk more about that, and then those relationships. So since we're talking about that now, I get how you can build a relationship with somebody who you're grappling with and you're in the gym with, and you see them outside of a work situation, maybe. And so you build rapport, you build, a completely different type of bond with somebody that you're doing that with. I mean, I do in sports all the time. All the guys that I play sport, that sort of thing happens. So in the business world, what are some things and tactics, or maybe it's not tactics is the right word, but how do you build those relationships and maybe something that you do that other people don't do?
So, Rana, I'm going to give you a story to illustrate this. When I was trading, before I left to set up my own trading company, I worked for a company that sent me here from England. They were a British trading company. And the American office decided to split with the UK office. And for a while, it was doing really well. And then they wanted to make some cuts. And one day just came to work and they had fired a third of the office. And they'd let go of this one trader who we're still really good friends to today. He was a really smart guy. And I was like, man, why did they let that guy go? And they kept this other guy who's also still a friend of mine today, who was a huge jokester. He was hilarious, but he never really made any money and he wasn't the best trader. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, that's really odd. And now looking back, that's actually it sums up what I want to say is being personable is something they don't teach you in business school, but it's so important because we want to be around people we like. And you and I haven't been talking for very long, but I immediately like you. You have really good energy. You seem like a great guy. I'm enjoying this conversation. There's people that we all know who it is, where you see their name pop up on your phone, and maybe it's a business person that you have to talk to, and you got that feeling like, oh, I don't want to talk to this guy. It's going to be contentious. It's not positive energy. And so it sounds so, if I had heard this when I was a young man, I'd have thought it's so silly, but just being a person that people want to talk to on the phone, being polite, being friendly, having good energy, being honest, having integrity. And I think that I don't have time to do all this, like to be going out to dinners with people trying to grow relationships with other brokers. I don't have time to be socializing. I'm very, very, I'm very careful with my time because it's so precious. and I have so little of it because I'm so busy. That doesn't mean that you can't still, even in the small interactions you're having, the phone calls, when you meet someone at a development, maybe you talk for 20 minutes, even in just those little periods, you can actually develop strong bonds. And I feel like I've got a really good network of really top producing brokers and developers that it's not like I've hung out with them a lot, but all our interactions have been, we're on the same page. I always want to give good energy. I always want to give all my knowledge. I'll always try and help make it a win-win situation. So it's just those little things. They go such a long way. And I always look back to this guy that they kept. And I see now why they kept. I mean, he was hilarious. Like every day he would make me laugh. And that's what you want to be around. Like the older I get, the more I realize that the best indication of success, it's not about your status. It's not about your title. It's not about zeros in the bank account. It's how many hours every day do you spend doing things you enjoy and spend around people you enjoy being around? And that's such an important lesson that I've only come to realize more recently. But it's something that I've realized as well as my life has evolved. I have been doing that, whether it's been more subconscious, but I've been just trying to spend more and more time with people I want to be around and less time with people I don't want to be around.
Yeah, that's solid. It reminds me of our company. We had this fix and flip and wholesale, and we were doing all kinds of transactions, that sort of thing. And we had a good little crew, right? We'd built it. We liked the energy in the office and that sort of thing. And then we had these consultants come in, and we were like, all right, how do we next level this thing? Like, how do we take it to the next? And they start, that person's wrong, this person's wrong, that's it. And it just killed the whole vibe, and then killed the company, So it was a big mistake that I made in taking some advice from an outside party instead of, keeping the culture the way it was and the people that you want to hang out with. So yeah, that's huge.
Well, I'll give you an example, Randall. So on the biggest mistake I've made in my professional career the last few years is I partnered with, it was my best friend who owns my real estate company, and actually just married him a few months ago. I was the officiant, but nice. I trust him with my life. He's such a great guy. So it was him and I, and we're always talking about investing in developments. And he introduced me, this is years ago, probably 6-7 years ago. He introduced me to this one developer that he knew. And then the one developer had a friend, and the four of us had a coffee, and we were all talking, and we kind of hatched this plan on the fly. And we picked a few buildings that we bought, and they needed a full gut rehab. And we started working together. Very early on, the two developers were not getting on well, and they both had very different sides of the story. And the one developer, he had an inspection company. He seemed like he was very stable. And my friend was like, Lawrence, I think this is the guy that's more stable. The other guy had some old lawsuits for some things. And he was like, it just seemed like he was a little less buttoned up, if that's the right way to put it. So I was in this very, very difficult position where I was kind of stuck with some property with the one guy who seemed more stable. And I ended up kind of putting everything in with him. And what happened is over time, I found out that the guy was very, very shady, and ended up costing me an insane amount of money and many years of stress, because I was kind of stuck with all this money invested in projects that I couldn't get out, and there was lawsuits, and he declared bankruptcy, and I lost a whole bunch of money. And looking back at the thing, what the lesson learned from the whole period was, I had this feeling, and I couldn't put my finger on it, what it was. But every time I was with the guy that seemed stable, who ended up screwing me over, I just had this feeling like I didn't really want to be around his energy. And the other guy I loved, he was great. He was from Romania. I'm originally from England. We would talk about Europe, and he just had this great energy, and I love being around him. And I overrode that because of my good friend was, he's an attorney and he's very stable. And he was like, Lawrence, I think you should go with this stable guy. And I overrode that feeling of my intuition, my subconscious. And it's such a powerful lesson. Naval Ravikant talks about this. He said, when someone brings me a business proposition, the first question I ask myself is not, will this make money? It's, do I want to spend time with this person? Do I want to have this guy calling me? Do I want to have long meetings with this person? Do I want to be having dinner and talking about problems with him? Do I want to be meeting him for coffee and troubleshooting? And if I had used that metric in this situation, I would have made the right decision in hindsight. And so that's been a really, really powerful lesson, is trust your intuition. And I don't know about you, Randall, but I can't think of one time, and I'm turning 45, in my 44 and 3/4 years, that my intuition and my gut feeling has been feeling about something and it's been proven wrong. But I can give you a dozen examples of where I've been proven right. I made the wrong decisions based on logic and fact when it was my intuition telling me something. So I think that's just such a wonderful point to remember. And it's been a really, really good lesson is the rest of my life, I'm going to be around people I want to be around. And hopefully we're going to make good financial decisions. But even if we don't, the worst case scenario is I'm going to be around people I want to be around.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to partner with anybody who I don't want to spend time with, no matter how much upside there is financially.
Yeah, that's huge. And I mean, I have this conversation with my wife quite a bit. I'm like, how do we want our lives to look? And that, I mean, you can go for, hitting home runs every single time and just swinging for the fences to make as much money as you possibly can. But yeah, with it can bring headaches. It can bring heartache. It can bring financial loss and ruin and all of that thing. If instead you focus on, I want my life to be around the people that I want to be around and still be successful. It's just a much different look at it. So yeah, I agree. That's a great way to put it. Man, there's so much that I want to talk about, right? So, one, you've touched on some development and so you're a real estate, are you broker or agent? You're in brokerage?
Broker, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So,
yes, broker.
So how much of your business is the brokerage side and how much is the actual investing side? Would you say it's 50-50 split or how's your company set up? Let's transition into that.
It's been changing a lot, Randall. So when I started in the business, I was investor before I even got my real estate license. So when I was still fighting, I had all this money from trading. And the only smart decision I made is I bought a big commercial property, which basically I put a bunch of money in the property. And it ended up being not the best long-term investment because it's retail and a lot of retail is kind of struggling right now. But it was really good in the fact that it tied up a huge bunch of money in something that I couldn't spend because at the time I was living life, enjoying life. And I was thinking in my head, once I'm done with my fighting career, I'm just going to go back on the trading floor in my spot in the trading pit and keep making, crazy amounts of money because there was so much money back then. And I didn't appreciate that when I was away, that whole business model of small trading groups making money in the Chicago border trade, it wasn't going to be around anymore. The high frequency trading came in. The big banks had these huge positions where they kind of ran through the small groups. So the 5 years I was away, that what I thought was going to be my future wasn't there anymore. So I remember being 35 and having kind of what I would call an early midlife crisis when I'd made every mistake financially, blown through all my money, kept living like I was making a fortune, even though I wasn't technically making very much. And then it got to the stage where, well, what am I going to do? And I remember thinking, man, I have an MBA and I don't remember one of my classes talking about real estate investing, but I can see I've been living off the profits of this commercial building and I can see what a great business model it is. I've got cash flow. I have tax depreciation for my taxes. I'm saving money there. I'm paying down my debt every month. So I just saw what a great business model it was. And I thought, man, I want to go more into this. And then my friend, who I mentioned, who I started with those developments, he was an attorney and he started a real estate company because if you're an attorney in Chicago, it's very easy to get your real estate license because the exams is much less. So he got his license and he's like, I'm setting up a company. He's like, Lawrence, you'd kill it in real estate. You're personable. You have this financial background. You have an English accent. You could do really well. So I was like, that could be my next step. Maybe I'll do real estate. So I ended up getting my license already after being an investor. And then when I first got new in the business, I just wanted to learn the city. I just wanted to take as many crappy leads as I could. And I just wanted to, talking about lessons learned, I realized right from the beginning, I didn't like feeling like a white belt. I was used to being a black belt in trading. I was very, very good at what I did. And now suddenly I'm in this new business where in trading, you can be incognito. You don't have to have social media. You don't have to put yourself out there. You're not trying to find clients. I would just get up in the morning, go to the trading floor, make a whole bunch of money, and then leave at 2 p.m. It was very, very different life. So I had to adapt. So I was like, okay, the first year, I'm just going to really invest in myself, try and make contacts and try and learn the city and learn the business and learn as much as I could. So then I was doing more just as a broker, trying to learn. And then once I started working with developers, I started putting my own money in projects to make money that way. So I've been doing that, for 8-9 years now, where every year I've got my real estate business where I'm just making money as a broker, but I've also got real estate, which hopefully I'm making money on the income, the passive income. And then I have money that I'm either giving to developers for some kind of return, or just recently I did my first development myself where I did everything. I bought the lot with a couple of partners. I got all the zoning changes with the city. I got the plans and permits approved. I broke ground. I was actually there with the digger, with the actual first time
I
breaking
saw
ground
that
during
picture,
myself.
man.
It was fun. Yeah, that was fun. That was a good, those things are crazy powerful. So that was actually just getting finished. I'm about 2 weeks out. So that's been a really fun project, and it's been really interesting because if anyone's been in real estate the last 3.5 years who's listening, ever since the start of COVID, really to now, well, it's been nearly 4 years now. It's been a crazy ride because every year has been so different. There's been so many things changing, whether it's been, the world shut down with COVID, but real estate kept going, whether there's been so many fears and optimism. We came out of 2020, 2021 was this boom year. There was no inventory. And then 2022 was still going strong until the end. And then the rates start going up. And then the whole of 2023 is slowing down. People are so worried, is there going to be a recession? And now it seems like it's going to be a booming 2024. So it's been such a unique ride. Anyone that's listening, that's in the business, that is frustrated with their 2023 because it was slower, I promise you that you can have an incredible 2024. My prediction is rates are going to come down a lot quicker than we think coming into the election. And it's going to be just like 2021, where it's going to be all the people on the sidelines are going to rush in the market. And it's going to be really, really crazy. It's going to be an incredible opportunity in 2024. That's my prediction.
I want to ask you about that then. Okay. So if they rush in, then how are you positioning yourself? Are you looking more on the brokerage side? You want to have more listings come to market and that's how you're going to capitalize, or all of the above? You're trying to bring more inventory online as on the development side.
I'm trying to do everything. Yeah. So as soon as we finish this one, I want to start a few more projects straight away. Hopefully be done by the end of the year. To build new construction takes about 4 to 5 months normally, but you have a few months in the beginning where you're getting all your zoning, if you have to have zoning changes or and getting your plans and permits. So I want to start that straight away. But I think that anything, and I'm under contract to buy a Airbnb property where I live in Cedar Lake in Indiana. I think anything that we buy now, and that it's not just real estate. I think that comes with, I think crypto is going to be higher. I think the stock market is going to be higher. I think we're going to see general asset inflation when interest rates come down. And I think it's going to be off to the races. We live in a really sad world where a huge amount of Americans are struggling to pay the bills because there's this crazy inflation with everything. And then you have this smaller subsection that have assets. And this is kind of exemplified by these politicians like Nancy Pelosi that have $100 million of stocks who are they're seeing all their assets inflating. And so it's the message that I'm always trying to shout from the rooftops is, of course, I work in real estate, so I talk about real estate, but it applies to anything. Try to put some money on the side and buy assets because the system is against people who don't have assets. Everything is going to keep going up. I don't see that changing. Ever since Nixon came off the gold standard, we've seen everything get over time much, much more expensive. And it's just like, it's assumed that that's the way it is. Things just go up. So if you don't protect yourself from that, and if you're working 2 jobs and you're just struggling to pay the rent, unfortunately, if you don't get some type of asset, that rent is going to keep going up because the underlying value is going to keep going up and the landlords are going to keep asking for more money. So it's just trying to figure out how you can get yourself an asset. And there's so many for first-time home buyers. There's all these different programs. There's one in Chicago where you can buy a multi-unit building up to $1 million, or I think maybe 1.1 million for 5% down for owner occupants. And you're like, well, 5% down is that's still a significant amount of money. Yes, but the seller can give closing credits. Maybe you can borrow a little money off a relative or a friend or something. And if you put 5% down on a building in February, March of 2024, and it goes up 5% over the year, you've actually doubled your money, right? Because that's the power of leverage. You've only put down 5%. So I think I think anything that you're doing right now, you're going to be, your future self will be very happy. I think that we're going to see, it's going to be a very, very busy year. And just on the brokerage side, I have a big goal. I want to sell 50 million of real estate. That'll be my best year. So I think, you can't fight the market too much. When I was young, I tried to fight life. And as I get older, it doesn't mean that I don't have a good work ethic and a strong will, but it means you have to accept things for what they are. So I had a better 2022 than 2023, and I'm not going to lose sleep over it because 2022 was a much better year economically and for real estate. So it's learning that when you're in a business that's cyclical and you're in a time that's busy, you have to make the most of that time, because, we don't know when the next slowdown is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were talking about 2023. I think you did what, 31 million? Is that what I saw?
Yes.
Post that?
Yeah.
Okay. So then let's talk, man. I still want to talk about development. I want to talk about the deals you're actually doing and how those are looking and how that 4-month process works. Because in San Antonio, it didn't take that long. I had a 14-unit development deal that we were working on, and just the entitlement process took us so long to get through. And so I'm kind of curious if you're doing that in Chicago, if you're doing that in Indiana, and so we can talk about that. But I also want to talk about sales volume just in general. So congrats on last year, even though it was a tough year. I mean, 31 million is still a solid year, man. You were talking about how your transaction volume worked and number of sales. And so I was kind of curious, what's the target market? Like, what's the standard sale size? Because was it a $7 million sale?
That was a big one. Yeah, that was a 40,000 square foot church.
Okay.
So it's actually, it was, yeah, so that was a little unusual. The typical deal that I would do, I mean, listen, I help friends get condos. I actually just did one of my most difficult transactions was for a friend from jiu-jitsu. And they were selling a place for 185 and then buying a place for 175. And they were using a 203B construction loan. And the buyer of their place they were selling was using an FHA loan. And the house was a mess. There were so many things we had to do. And it was the most complicated, difficult 2-month transaction. And I think I even took it at a reduced fee to help them out because, they're a friend. And I knew they don't have too much money. So that was a tiny check for an insane amount of work.
Yeah.
And but typically the typical deal I do is going to be people buying and selling investment buildings. And I'd say the average investment building, obviously they're all different, but the average one is going to be new construction, 3 units, and it's going to be selling somewhere in the mid to high 800s. So for instance, I closed 3 in the last week of the year, and it was 2 side-by-side new construction buildings in this medical district in Chicago. And the developer that built it is my client. He's a good friend of mine now. So I represented the seller, but I also represented the buyer. He was out of Tampa. He was an investor. So he bought those. And then the third building was on the south side. I represented the developer, different developer, and the buyer was an investor in Boston. And so that's kind of my business model is I have clients from all over Texas, East Coast, West Coast, and it's people that look to the Midwest because the Midwest traditionally has some of the highest cap rates in the city. And the hardest thing for people that live out of state is they can buy a building, but what about all the logistics? So my business model is I offer them a complete turnkey experience. I've even had investors buy buildings that have never even seen it. They'll do walkthroughs with me. I'll help them with the inspection. We help them with the financing if they need help with that. I can help them with a great local attorney. We close. I set them up with a property manager. Sometimes I even help get the place leased for them during the transition. Then I hand it off to the property manager, and then I go about my merry way. So that's kind of what they always say is with wealthy people, you want to solve their problems. Because most people who are successful are incredibly busy. And so if you can do things that make life easy for them and save them time, then they're going to be very happy. So that's kind of my business model that I guess I didn't think about this. It kind of evolved naturally, but it's fostering relationships with developers to have access to really good listings for investors and then developing a national network of investors. So for instance, my really nice couple, they're Australian from Boston that bought this building. They own a few buildings already. And they said, I love the way this guy does work. I love his work. I love the numbers. Let me know when he has his next one and I want to buy it. And he's already started the project. He's just getting approved for the permits for his next one. He's probably going to be 4 months out. When it's a month or 2 from being finished, I'm going to call them and say, hey, he's got another project. He wants this much. And I'd imagine they're going to say, perfect, let's write an offer. Mm-hmm. So that's a way of leveraging relationships and knowledge. And I mean, how much work is that? I'm not taking her on 25 showings. It's a very efficient way to make money.
Yeah.
So I was laughing at that deal I mentioned because it was just there was so many moving parts and everything. But I don't mind. Like for me, it's not about money. Like I enjoy helping people, and I've sold things for free for friends to help them out. It's not always about money. It's about being happy with people you're around. And like we said earlier, so that wasn't too much of a pain. But in general, that business model is having people who have money in the bank and they want to buy the right building, but they don't know what the building is, and the inventory is very tight. So having access to what's coming, what's a good idea, that's kind of my niche, and it's been really great because it's a win-win for everybody. The developers are happy because if I rep both sides, normally I cut my commission for them, I help them out, and the buyers are happy because they're getting a good price because the developers got less closing costs and less commission. So it tends to work out for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love that business model, honestly. And I looked at some of the finished products on your Instagram deal, and I like that. So is it 3 units? Are they stacked?
Yes, exactly. So typically in Chicago, that on a normal size lot or even a slightly bigger lot, you typically only have the zoning for about 36 to 3,800 square foot. So normally builders do 3 simplex units, and each one's going to be 3 bed, 2 bath, and they're going to be between 12 and 1350 square foot a unit. So that's very typical. So they're all different locations, small. One guy, he bought a bunch of lots that are 30 foot wide instead of standard 25 foot wide. So his buildings are just a couple of feet wider, and that makes a huge difference when you walk in. Just that those extra couple of feet, the living area is so much bigger, the kitchen area, the bedrooms are slightly wider. So like things like that, there's little tweaks. And then other times, on the south side in Chicago, there's a lot of longer lots. So maybe they're 20 foot wide, but instead of being 125 long, which is standard, a lot of them are 140 or 160. So then you can have much longer units too. So it's just about every builder's trying to maximize the livable space.
Yeah.
And the one thing about the development is this is something I didn't realize when I was new in the business. When I was new in the business and I partnered with that one developer I mentioned earlier who screwed me over, his business model was rehabs. So I was doing a lot of rehabs. And I thought rehabs was such a good model because if you do a full gut rehab, you are doing plumbing, you are doing electrics, you are doing mechanicals. Of course, you're doing new appliances in the kitchen. A lot of the time you're doing a brand new roof. So you're doing new windows. The only thing that you're keeping a lot of the time is just the brick exterior and the foundation, and then you're moving things around. So in my head, I'd always say, man, that it's so much better a full gut rehab because the numbers are good for investors, and you don't have to pay extra for new construction. New construction, they tend to tax more. So I had that mindset of the best business model, and the first buildings I was buying were all rehabs. And now I realized that new construction has so many hidden benefits. So there's some cachet with tenants. It's so much easier to rent new construction because they love being the first in a building, or even if they're not the first, even if they're the second or third. The idea of a new building is so much more appealing to rehab. Rehab, a lot of the time, the space, the layouts are not ideal because you're kind of working with what you have. New construction, typically, if a builder's good, there's no wasted space, and even in full gut rehabs, the maintenance is generally higher. There's always things that come up. It's generally higher than in new construction. And the numbers on new construction, it's with the higher rents, the cap rates are not even that different. So I'm selling a 3-unit rehab and a 3-unit new construction, and the cap rates are pretty comparable. So for me, I'm very, very high on new construction for investors. I think it's such a low maintenance business model. And a lot of the time, one of my pet hates around in the business is people have pro formas, and it looks like the numbers are going to be so good, but the reality is you're never going to collect that rent. It's in an area where you're going to have evictions left and right. You're on a lot of people on pro formas don't put half the expenses you're going to have, all the maintenance expenses, the snow removal, or they literally just put tax, insurance, and maybe water or something. So it's just not realistic. And one thing about when you do pro formas for new construction, if you can get the right tenants who aren't going to be difficult and they're going to pay rent, I think you're actually going to see those numbers. That's, so that is, and just an aside for real estate, people talk about it as passive investing, and it's passive in the sense that you don't have to do things every day. But even if you have a property manager who takes care of everything, there's still going to be instances where he calls you and he says, hey, Lawrence, I've got this tenant. They're 6 weeks behind. Do you want to serve them a 5-day notice? They said they might be able to pay installments. What do you want to do here? Or, hey, Lawrence, I have this big expense that, I'm having problems here. Do you want me to do a Band-Aid on the problem? Or do you want to invest, $4,500 and get the solution fixed? So you still have to make, there's still things to think about. But in general, the property manager is going to take care of everything.
Yeah.
If you're managing it yourself, which I have a lot of investor clients do, then it's definitely not passive. You can systematize it a bit. You can leave a lockbox there. So every time there's issues, you don't actually have to go. You just give the keys to a licensed vendor who takes care of it. But the skill with that is, who do you call when a tenant calls you at 10:30 on a Thursday and says, "Hey, I've got a problem with this. The water's coming through from the bathroom, and do you have a plumber that can rush over there and fix it straight away?" Is that going to stress you out? So you have to ask all these questions. Because when I was new in the business, I used to manage a bunch of my properties, and I didn't realize the value of my time. I used to think, listen, I do a great job managing them, so I should keep managing them. And then I had a really good friend tell me, "Lawrence, you could probably clean the floor of a McDonald's better than the guy that's cleaning it. Does that mean you should be cleaning the floor?" And I was like, that's a good point.
Good point.
just because you can do something well. So most people that they have a bit of reticence about paying a 7% management fee. But I think if you run the numbers about what your time is worth, I'm always going to go for management. So the best decision I made was when I was getting married. I wanted to have a 3-week wedding and honeymoon, and I didn't want to be bothered by tenants. And I was like, let me see how this goes. And I switched over, and I was like, my God, why didn't I do this years ago? So it's just that's a really great thing, actually, for anything in life is trying to figure out what your time is worth and how much of life do you outsource. And I was listening to Camozzi. I think it's Alex Camozzi. He's great, very motivational. Yeah. And he was saying something about when he had a sale and he realized that his value was worth whatever it was, $250 an hour. He said, okay, from now on, I'm going to outsource everything. I'm never going to cook again. I'm never going to clean again. I'm going to outsource everything. I will give you the other side of that. When I was a kid, I was outside with my dad in our backyard. And my dad is a retired pilot. And he said, Lawrence, he said, we were just talking. And he said, I have colleagues who take every bit of overtime to fly because it pays so well. And then they don't have any time to do anything. Like they outsource everything. They have a gardener, they have this, they have that. He said, I don't want to always be away working and be chasing money. I enjoy being outside with you. And I think at the time I was going to mow the lawn or something. I did that as a kid. And he's like, we're out in the sunshine and we're in the backyard and there's birds flying around. And that always stuck with me is, life isn't just about being efficient and outsourcing everything. There's certain things that I actually do want to do just because it's hard. Like one of my goals, I have 8 acres here and my backyard is a complete mess. And I could pay a guy to do it, or I could get a chainsaw. My neighbor said it'd help. My buddy's my neighbor. And we're going to chop a bunch of fallen trees down and clear it up ourselves because then you're connected to the earth. Yeah. So life isn't always just about being the most efficient. So that's just my other side of it. But having said that, property manager is definitely worth his weight in gold.
I couldn't agree more.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Sorry, last thing I'll say is, it's not about the hassle. It's about the time it comes. So I'll never forget when it was 11:15 on a Sunday night, and I was just relaxing with my ex-girlfriend at the time. And I got a call I had these young tenants, and there was some leak somewhere, and they called me crying. And I remember thinking, like, I hadn't heard from them for 6 months. They were great tenants, but I did not want to deal with this at 11:15 on a Sunday night, like trying to find an emergency plumber or whatever the issue was. So it's not that a property manager, it's not that it's that time consuming. That's the mistake people make. It's the inconvenience of dealing with hassles when you don't want to deal with them. And I think that for me is priceless.
If you think of it in the sense that if you have an investment like that, like we're buying a 24 unit and we're going to manage that ourselves to start with, because I want to see what the tenant base is like. And there's reasons and rationale for doing it. But we do want to bring on management so then we can manage them better. But if you think of it in the sense that you are buying a business, right? You're investing in a business. And if you want to be able to be efficient with your family life and be there with your kids and at the same time run whatever business you are currently in, if you're trading, if you're doing whatever it is, then you need like a VP of operations that's running, and that's your property management company. So that's how I think of it all the time. It does buy your time back, but you still have to manage the manager. You're just going to get a report, yes, and you're going to get, once in a while, an indication of something that's happening. And you may have to move some KPIs or move some things around, but at the same time, you're not spending all of your time on it. Absolutely. All right, man. I love your information and the knowledge and the things that you're going down and talking about. I love it. So I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned a minute ago for the project that you guys are doing, the cap rates. So like, what are the cap rates right now in Chicago for that sort of thing?
So it's very, when you look to people listening that aren't too familiar, a cap rate is a way to measure the return on a building when you take the interest rate out. So it's assuming you buying a building for cash, and then what are you getting on that return? And the reason that the reason most people buy with loans, so they should use a cash on cash return. The reason, because that's more realistic, right?
Yep.
The reason cap rates are really good for people that are listening is I can compare a property that's sold in 2022 with something that I'm selling next month. And even though during those times, interest rates are up probably 120% or something crazy, I can still compare properties because it takes that out. So it takes out the cyclical, movement of interest rates in order to compare properties. So, the cap rates right now in Chicago for the stuff that I'm selling, the good buildings, it's a little, so you always have 2 years on my pro forma, because the first year you don't really have a tax, because typically it's either a couple of $100 or sometimes it's even nothing, depending on the lot, because there's nothing on it yet. Yeah. And then you typically, if you close and the next day it gets reassessed, the tax, it's always paid the following year. So normally you can get a year free with your taxes. I had a guy that bought 2 buildings 2.5 years ago, and I just looked up the other day. I was curious where the taxes came up. One of them was reassessed at 1.7% of the property value. The other one was still, $600 based on the lot. I was like, oh, he's done well. He's 2 years in and he hasn't
winning,
paid tax yet. Exactly. So initially, I'm going to talk about year 2. Once you have the tax assessed, we're seeing the cap rates, I would say, between 7 and 8, which for new construction is really, really strong. Phenomenal. Especially when you're considering they come with a 1-year developer's warranty, and they are so low maintenance. Like, well, you're talking about a 20+ unit building. That's an unbelievable amount of tenants to manage and moving parts. But if you're buying your first building and it's a 3-unit building and you get 3 good tenants, that's not much to manage. That's easy. And a lot of people manage it for a year or two, because I always tell people, if they ask me, I said, listen, if you don't mind dealing with a few things, you'll learn a lot in the next year or two managing this building. So I always say, for me, knowledge is power. I said, yeah, manage it yourself. And you can always give it to a property manager later. And one thing that you said that I really like is you said you have to manage the manager. And one of the skills and one of the benefits of me, I think, is there's dozens of property managers in Chicago. And I've actually worked with a bunch myself. I've done a lot of research, boots on the ground with different managers. And I'm going to say this before I say that most of them are terrible. Property management is a really hard business. It really is. It's such a low margin business. It's very difficult. It's 365 days, 24 hours a day. That there's always issues that come up. And you're dealing with, evictions and I mean, in Chicago, we're dealing with things like, a stray bullet goes through a window and then the tenant says, I want to break their lease. And it's like, well, legally you can't, but I'm also a human. And if you've got 2 young kids, I get it. Like I've lost a lot of money by being a human and letting people out of leases in winter and things like that. So, having a property manager is very different from having a good property manager. And I only refer to property managers, that I work with closely, and I've got clients that complain about them, and I laugh and I said, you have no idea how good they are compared to most of them, that I've worked with. So there's a world of difference between having a good property manager and having a bad property manager. And a bad property manager, you could easily buy one building, have a bad property manager, not be happy with him, and then say, real estate doesn't work, I want to sell the building and invest in stocks. And I've had that. I've had clients that call me and they said, hey, how much does your property manager charge? And I said, 7%. And they're like, it's too expensive. And then I hear from them 4 months later and they say, Lawrence, I have a vacant building. And I say, what happened? And they say, I found this guy, he only charged 4%. But I have a vacant building. And I was like, well, that's a great example of short-term thinking, right? You're trying to save a few percent by getting the cheapest. And, if you want to get the cheapest broker, you're probably going to use Redfin, and Redfin don't have the best reputation in the business, because, I think they cost a lot of people money. So that's another example of short-term thinking.
Yeah. The 4% vacant building, and they only get paid, or they're supposed to only get paid on like gross rents received. Right. And it's like, yes, they're not getting any rent, then they're not going to get paid, and they have zero motivation to fill your building up again. Exactly. So yeah, just keep that in mind. All right. So I wanted to ask you again, you mentioned something about the way you guys are selling these things. So in our 14 unit development. We ended up selling the dirt before, once we got it entitled, we sold the dirt. So we didn't go through the process, but I looked at the model of like condominiumizing the individual units and then selling those things off. But we also looked at selling off the plan. So have your developers, if you already have this couple in Chicago in Boston, they want to buy this thing. Is there a reason you guys aren't selling those things just pre-sale? They come in and they're financing it essentially, and the builder just delivers. And is there a rationale there? Or what's the?
So most people don't want to sign a contract until they've seen the building kind of 3/4 of the way there.
Okay.
So I think that would almost be like they'd almost be an investor then, right? Where they're put in they're going under contract. But also most people like that's a perfect example. That couple in Boston, they're using a loan 25% down. Sometimes they put down a little more, 30 or 35, but they're using a loan and it has to be finished for them to get their loan. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, it has to be different. But I do have developers. I have one guy his business model is he buys buildings with certain zoning. And then before he even rehabs it, he has very good relationships with the city and the alderman. And so a lot of the time, what he does is he'll change the zoning from, sometimes it'll be a 4 unit to 6 units or 4 units to 7 units. So he increases the zoning and then he'll either do the work himself and then keep it, or sometimes he sells it too, or sometimes he'll just sell it as a zoning change. And, he just sits on it for a year, takes a bit of time, hasn't put any really money in, minor money for the fees for the change, but there's not very much. And then he sells it for, 150,000 more to a different developer who just wants to buy something and start straight away. So there's all these different ways of making money. And one thing I love about real estate is, there's the wholesaler who buys in bulk and then he sells at a reduced price to developers, individual units. So there's all these different ways to make money. And one thing, anyone that's listening to this, that's in the business, or maybe they want to get their real estate license and start, is initially, I always say, think long-term and invest in yourself. So try to learn the market, learn as much as you can. I have brokers that still couldn't tell you, okay, what is a cap rate? And they couldn't tell you. I have brokers that have been doing this a while that still rent the place to live in. They've never actually bought a place themselves, So it's try to get as much knowledge as you can. But if you can, try to figure out, and this actually applies to life too. There's a great book called Authentic Happiness by Martin Seligman. And he was one of the people who he started the positive psychology movement. Because before him, psychology was about getting people who were messed up and down and out to average. And Martin Seligman, he said, what about philosophy about getting average people to flourishing, to excellence? And he said, we all have signature strengths within us. So there's a test you can take, the signature strengths test, and it gives you 5 signature strengths. So he said, the key to a good life is to have work, because we spend most of our life working, that utilizes some of these top signature strengths. And then as a bonus, if you can do something that tries to help people out as well, that's the key to a good life. So I'll use my example. Real estate does hit several of my signature strengths. And when I can do deals for friends and I can help them out and I almost get nothing for it, that's my way of giving back. So I'm trying to tick all those boxes. If you can try and find a niche, and initially you're not going to know what your niche is. And of course, looking back now, it's obvious with my background in finance, it's obvious that my niche should be in investment properties. But at the time, it wasn't that clear to me. It kind of just evolved that way. So I've got a really good friend who, we call it 007. He's so suave and sophisticated and classy, and he can charm anyone. He's so charming. So he does a lot of high-end, $1 million condos in Chicago. And I'm always telling him, you've got to focus more on this. This is your niche. This is your niche. He's one of my best friends and we work together a lot. If he sometimes calls me, he's like, Lawrence, I've got this multi-unit to sell. Can we work it together and we'll split the commission? Because he knows that I'll probably have buyers for it. It's my niche. If I have some guy call and they say, hey, I've got this, $2 million condo in downtown Chicago at this beautiful new construction building. Can you help me sell it? I'll say yes. And I'm happy to split the commission with this guy because I'll have him do most of the open house. I'll have him do most of the work because that's his niche. Yeah. So when you're starting out in the business, you don't know what your niche is. But if you can try and find a niche that appeals to your signature strengths, that's where I got sidetracked. Sorry.
There you go.
But it's trying to find what you enjoy doing and what you're good at doing, and then try to build that into how you want to specialize in real estate. And that's what's so beautiful about all these different modalities is I've got a really good friend, shout out Nick Lamagna. His niche is he flies all over the country. He's actually a jiu-jitsu black belt as well. So he loves dropping in. He's got 20 different gyms around the country that he drops in. He's got friends there. But he's always looking for deals in different states. And then he syndicates them or he does them himself. So his business model, it works for him. He's a single guy and he loves jiu-jitsu. He loves to train at all these different gyms. His niche is being flexible to do that. Me personally, being a married guy, trying for kid number 2 and having 3 dogs, I would hate that. I traveled so much when I'm young and I'm so glad I did because I only want to travel. I'm going to Hawaii next week for Valentine's Day. That's my idea of travel. It's not flying to Arkansas to check out a great project and then going to Detroit to see another project and then flying to LA. That sounds awful to me. So it's trying to find a niche that works for your signature strengths. I think is so good, but you can't do that initially. It's almost like with my son, if he asked me, what do you think I should do? I would say do a bunch of crappy jobs to figure out what you don't want to do. And then hopefully along the way, you'll learn skills and you'll figure out what you do want to do. Because, there's those kids when they're 8 years old and they say, I want to be a fireman. There's some people that know what they want to be, but I don't know about you. I've already had 3 separate careers and I still don't know what the 4th one's going to be. Who knows? Yeah. Hopefully it'll be different in 10 years.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. I love the experiential approach to learning what it is you're good at and what you enjoy. Because I didn't come out of the womb and just say, that's what I want to do. I know that's what I'm going to do. I know plenty of my friends from high school and college that knew it and they knew their path and that sort of thing. So, awesome advice. Look, one more thing I want to ask you about, just because it was on that same post that I saw. So the forgotten asset class, what are we talking about here? Let's get a little plug and then tell me what's going on, because I want to know.
Thank you for that. So, one thing I've always had is a lot of respect for authority. And I don't know where it came from, but I was always a good kid. I listened to my parents. And I've been a voracious reader since I was a kid. My dad didn't have a TV in the house when I was young. He wanted us either outside playing, doing sports, or learning, reading. And so I've had this wonderful gift of reading and just curiosity. That's one of my signature strengths, actually. When I took the test the first time at 24, my signature strength, number 1 was curiosity and love of learning. And number 2 was perseverance and strength of will. And as a funny aside, Randall, when I took it a couple of weeks ago, because I was curious to see how it changed, the number 1 thing was love. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I become a hippie. But I guess that's
granola bars.
I have a lot of love to give, which is so funny. But so I had this respect for authority. And the more I read, I would, if someone's a published author, I'd assume that they knew what they're doing and they knew what they're talking about. And the more I read, the more I realized that there's incredible people out there who've written incredible books. But there's also a lot of people that have written things because they've never actually been able to do it. So it's like that old saying, you have the incredible people that have achieved so much. And in the end of the arc of their life, they want to give back and they want to help and they want to teach. I love those people. What I don't like is the people that are trying to be the life coaches when their own life is a mess. It's like they're the overweight personal trainer. It's like, listen, I'm a libertarian. Like, if you want to be overweight, I think it's great. Like, be you, but don't try to be overweight and then have a job where your business is trying to get people healthy. It's kind of it's a bit silly. So I've noticed the last few years that a lot of people, like, I listened to this one book and it was an author I love. He's written a few books, and then he started talking about fighting. And I was like, okay, this is my wheelhouse, right? I'm a former professional fighter. I've been in martial arts for 31 years. And what he said was not true. He was saying that weight doesn't matter. And there's a reason we have weight classes. And so I started to think, man, maybe I've got to have less respect for authority. And then I started to see people that are writing real estate books. And I'm like, man, or in Chicago, they have these meetups where people have these investing events. And I'm like, I know these people. I know Chicago. I'm like, I know this guy's done almost no business, and suddenly he's doing an event trying to talk about investing in multi-units. The guy doesn't own any, and he sells a few $1 million a year. Like, this is crazy. So I reluctantly realized that, unfortunately, whether I have a natural introvert side of me where I don't like putting myself out there. And actually, one of my 2024 goals was to market myself more, do more videos of properties, more explanation, and just put myself out there more. And so one thing I found the last few years was I'd have a lot of investors say to me, hey, do you have a good book that talks about investing that can give me the basics? And there's not really a great book. Gary Keller wrote an incredible book on like real estate agents, and he's written some books on he's written a book that touches real estate investing. It has some good points on it. And there's a great book that I read that was, I don't know, even know where I got it. It was written like 40 years ago. And it talks about the philosophy of real estate investing. But they're not really modern, and they're not really the kind of book that I want, that I'd want to recommend to people. So I thought I'll just write it. So I have a really good friend, shout out my buddy, Brad Anastasia. He's one of my oldest friends, jiu-jitsu black belt. And we started investing in property years ago. We bought a building together, and we bought buildings together. We sold buildings together. He's bought a bunch of buildings himself. And he's a former investment banker, and he's very good about numbers and analytics. That stuff, I do it for clients, but it doesn't really interest me. So we decided to write a book, and we called it the forgotten asset class, because when I, like I mentioned before, when I did my MBA, they only talk about 3 asset classes: stocks, bonds, and cash. And they have certain formulas that they recommend people do. And real estate, they never really touched on real estate. And I think the reason is because it's just too different. I know so much about the Chicago market, but if you ask me about the San Antonio market, I'm going to shrug my shoulders. I don't know too much about other markets. It's just so different. I couldn't tell you about the market in Sydney right now. I know a little bit about the market in London because I have friends there, but not much. So it's so different. And even in a city, you go 4 blocks west, it's a completely different world to 3 blocks east. It's block by block. It's so specific to Chicago. So I think the reason that MBA, they like to have these programs that they're more, you can teach, you can have a school in Shanghai, a school in Beijing, and a school in London, and you can all teach the same things in an MBA class, and anyone can have access to pull up an E-Trade account and buy a stock or invest in a bond. So I think real estate is very specific, but there's certain themes that translate. So our book we're talking about that 4th asset class that I think is forgotten. And I think for people like you and I, kind of at our stage of life where we have young families and we're working hard, the biggest thing why real estate is important, it's not even for the cash flow. It's not for the appreciation. It's for the tax benefits. Anything you can save so much on your taxes, because we're at the stage where we're making more now than we're probably going to be making when we're retired, or we were making when we were first, out of college or whatever it was. So I think it's for all my peer group, it's such an important message that, yes, there's a bit you have to learn. You have to have someone like me who you trust that can give you options and give you recommendations and take you through the process. It's a lot easier just to pull up an account and, put 10 grand in a stock or something. So yes, it's more moving parts, but it's such an amazing business model. So the book is, my friend Brad, he did a lot of the more technical there's a few chapters on the actual buying process. So that from analyzing a property to writing an offer to closing, and then, do you manage yourself? Do you outsource it? Kind of that stuff. The parts that I write about is my own journey, and just about things like the philosophy of money. Like, what does money represent? Money is not the be all and end all, but it's definitely an amplifier. And it doesn't end your stresses, but the one stress it ends is your financial stress. And I'll never forget when I was young and I was talking to my co-author, Brad. I was at his house and I was showing him some position, some stock I was trading at the time. And he's like, brother, is that your stock? Is that your trading account? And the balance was, I don't know, 850. And he's like, Jesus, I didn't know you're so wealthy. And for me, I was used to having a lot of money because I made a lot of money in my 20s of trading. And I didn't realize if you're young, you might have the misconception that if you work really hard and you do things you hate to make money, that's going to make you happy. That's the wrong misconception. That you can only realize that once you've been wealthy. So I had this incredible gift and incredible curse that I was a multimillionaire before I was 30. And it opened up so many doors, and it made me have such a wonderfully interesting life with a lot of different experiences and career pivots. That was wonderful. The downside of that is when you have a lot of success too early, your expectations get really high, and happiness is the difference between expectation and reality. So I had a lot of soul searching when I was kind of rebuilding, and I made a lot of mistakes and bad luck and bad partners. And so that was the other side of the coin. But the lessons that I talk about is just, what are you trying to do this for? And if you, like for me, I have certain non-negotiables. Like, I want to be healthy. Well, it's very difficult to be healthy when you're working 15 hours at a job you hate. You can still try to squeeze in a workout, but you're just not going to be a happy person. You're probably not going to be very healthy. So I talk a lot about my own personal journey and how real estate was such a great thing that almost saved me. But I only came to it even as a guy who's curious, who read a lot, who's got an MBA, who's had different jobs, who worked in finance. I didn't really understand the real estate model until my mid-30s. And basically it was largely through my best friend who owns my real estate company, Mo. We lived in the same building. We both had dogs. I would see him at the dog park and I'd start chatting to him. And that's how I was exposed to it, So that's the idea of this book is talking about some of the lessons I've learned from my personal journey. And as I'm sure you can tell, I love the philosophy of life. Like my goal is I want to be a black belt in life, not in jiu-jitsu, not in money. I want to be a black belt in life. I want it all, right? I want to try to maximize my human experience. And I think a big part of it is financial, knowledge and sophistication, because unfortunately, like I kind of touched on earlier, we live in an inflationary world. And Michael Saylor, he's I think the largest owner of Bitcoin. He has this wonderful saying, and he said, Bitcoin is not about trying to transfer money from London to Tokyo. It's about trying to keep your wealth from 2024 to 2050. It's unfortunately, we've seen every year the purchasing power of the dollar is going down and asset prices are going up. So if I can spread the message, and of course I'm using real estate as my tool, but I want to just reiterate on this message. Like, listen, if you're putting, a certain amount of your paycheck every month in the S&P, that's really great. Like, just put your money in assets. The one advantage that real estate has that the other ones don't is the two big advantages. It has the leverage and it has the tax benefits. So yeah, I'm so passionate about spreading the message. The final draft is just being edited. I had an editor go through it, and then my wife actually wanted to read it, and she's going through it this week. And then I'm really hoping to get it published very soon. And then the real hard work's going to start around. I'm bugging people to go on podcasts to talk about it. And I'm giving away copies to people. And the promotion, which no one likes the promotion, especially not me. But it's really cool because as a lifelong reader, it's not a huge book. It's less than 200 pages because we edited it. It was longer. We edited it down. But it was a lot harder. I thought I'd bang it out in a couple of weeks. I'll write a book, easy. With the distractions, and I'm sure you can tell with two young kids, when I'm juggling so many things in life, it was very difficult to actually sit down and go deep with my thoughts and feelings and try to express what I want to express. So it's been a really good journey. It's been very hard. And one of my goals in life is do hard things because I think that makes you a more complex person. So I'm already thinking I want to write my second book, and it's going to be the top 10 lessons that I've learned through a lot of my failures and tough times that I want to pass on to my son. And the big thing is it's almost like an insurance. Like if he's 3 years old, if something happens to me and I don't get to be around when he's older as an adult, at least he'll have a part of me in these words. So that's kind of my motivation. I know it's a little bit morbid, but it's like we don't know the future, and hopefully I won't need it, but otherwise I'll give it to him when he's 13. Yeah. But that's the next project, so it's exciting. I'm really
that's awesome, man. So I was sitting around. I think my son was 3, and I was kind of doing the same thing, and I was turning 40, and I was like, man, I'm gonna be 50. This kid's gonna be 13 when I'm 50. Like, what am I doing with my life? Sort of, reflection point. And so I started journaling every morning, writing a note to him, to my wife, and then to my daughter now. And I've gotten away from that. Unfortunately, I really want to get back into that because, I read another book. I think it was, the author of Flash Boys and a few things like, I forget what his name was, but, he wrote a book about being a dad and just like what it was like being a dad. So I read that and I was like, oh man, I'm going to do that. So I love that idea of just writing down the lessons. A buddy of mine was in the military and he went blind and he had some medical issues and some things going on. And he did that. He wrote a letter to his kid because he was like, I don't know, how this health is going to affect me long term and if I'm going to be there. So I love that idea. So yeah, kudos, man. Lawrence, you're a beast, man. Like physically fit, financially, like, it's awesome, man. So I appreciate you jumping on, sharing your knowledge and information. Looking forward to getting the book and reading it as well. So, when you get it, we can throw a link to it in the show notes whenever you guys are ready for that. So, but yeah, I really appreciate you jumping on. It's been awesome to get to know you and all your contact. If you're looking for a property in the Chicago, I don't know if you're doing deals in Indiana, reach out to Lawrence. I'm going to put all his contact information in the show notes so you guys can reach out to him. Awesome guy just from our quick conversation. So look forward to seeing what you do in 2024, man.
Appreciate you, Randall. Thank you so much. Let's talk soon.
Surprisingly, most of the agents we speak with got into real estate hoping to gain passive income and become work optional. However, only 1 in 5 ever start investing. Most are simply too afraid to start. Once you get educated by listening to this show, you'll be able to overcome that fear and become the 1 in 5 who are finding financial freedom. Don't miss a single episode. If you want to stay up to date, the best way is to make sure you're subscribed. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do it now. And we'll catch you on the next episode.